Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pi, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. Sport runs deep in Ricky Paugh's blood. Beyond his time as a baseball player, he's the founder of 1440 Sports and an entrepreneur whose values are driven by the psychology of team sports, selfless relationships, measured emotion, and the power of a great coach. All of these qualities make a great athlete. They also forged Ricky's incredible career, which now sees him as an essential part of some of the world's biggest sports, from Formula One and NASCAR to the PGA Tour and the European Tour. Ricky's journey is proof that, with relentless ambition and a deep, genuine interest in people, you can fashion yourself a business that serves your dreams. Welcome, Ricky. Thank you for coming on Pivot Points today. In order to just get everybody to understand about your amazing career, would you mind just doing a little introduction on yourself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, Dave, look, first and foremost, thanks for having me on. It's always great to see you. I think you might be that's the first time that amazing has ever preceded, anything directionally about my career. So that's a first, and I've got it on camera. So that's good. But look, ultimately about me, first and foremost, I'm a misplaced American over here in this in the wonderful UK. I've been here about 20 years. As every story like that goes, was supposed to be here for about a year, and then I met a girl from Sussex who I thought had a really cute accent, and 20 years later, we've got a couple of kids, and now we have a business here, which we call 1440 Sports, which is a go-to-market. B2B go-to-market consultancy, which I would say is dressed up as a sports marketing agency operating in Formula One and Formula E, NASCAR, IndyCar, all kinds of other kind of cool stuff. But that's a little summary about me and some of the stuff we're doing.
Okay, fantastic. And just going back in time a bit, when you came out of college or university, I gather you were a baseball player or a keen baseball player or nearly a pro baseball player.
Yeah, I mean, I actually was a pro. I got paid to play, Dave. So that's the definition. Yeah.
So how did you transition from wanting to be a sports person into business? Did you want to go professional in sports? Because it's tough going pro, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I grew up in a very athletic household, and sport was very much at the heart of everything that we did. But my mother actually had this amazing quote that we kind of had to live by, which was first a gentleman, then a scholar, and then an athlete. And so despite all my desires and ambitions to eventually become, Roger Clemens or Ricky Henderson or, enter famous baseball player here, I think there was always this amazing, strong foundation of we have to also be really good people and we have to be academically minded. And so it was, how do you balance all of those things? And so we always had a fallback. And as I went and pursued a professional career and I knocked around in what we call the minor leagues in the United States, in the back of my head was always what's next, right? And I had an agent who used to say, what are you going to do when you blow out your knee? And I didn't blow out my knee, I blew out my shoulder. So luckily I did have a plan. And that plan at the time was I thought I would go to law school. And then after that, I would, kind of see where that would take me. And interestingly enough, as I was studying for law school post my career, I stumbled on this great firm called the Corporate Executive Board, which is, I just was literally going to work there for a year to save some money before I went to law school. And lo and behold, it's entered me into a whole different trajectory in a career in business. So, but yes, I would say sport was more than a dalliance. It was very much at the core of where I was trying to go with my life. Didn't work out, and luckily I followed mom's advice and had a bit of a backup.
Yeah, and so Corporate Executive Board, what do they do? Did you stop doing law and then you made a big decision and decided to do Corporate Executive Board, or did you finish law and do your Corporate Executive Board? Just so I'm clear.
Never even got to law. Didn't even sniff a classroom, Dave. So, look, while I was studying to go to law school and getting ready to go to law school, Corporate Executive Board, potentially the world's worst named business, had an average age of 25. Okay, so there was about 80 employees, average age was 25, and had just IPO'd on the NASDAQ, $12 a share on the NASDAQ. And it did syndicated best practices research, which again, also arguably the most boring topic ever. But we worked with the C-suite at all enterprise level companies, working with the CXO in those companies on their strategic initiatives, and we were teaching them what the strategic best practices were to overcome those initiatives. It just so happened that it was an incredibly fun place to work, an incredible culture, and it was a rocket ship. So, we did 28 consecutive quarters of 25% or more growth.
Wow.
It was a great run. And I remember speaking with a managing partner of a huge law firm, and he said, look, unless you really love the law, just wait, just put that on hold. See where this plays out. And, it was some of the greatest advice I ever got, because we were young and probably making more money than we ever should have. And we were having a great time doing it. So that's how I ended up going that route.
I mean, you must have learned a ton at that age, getting exposed to C-suite executives and the decisions and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, right, when you're young and you're starting your career, you don't really know. You kind of don't know that privileged seat that you're in. I was at the time I was in the older side of the functional area that I was in, and eventually I got promoted very, very quickly. And suddenly I'm going and I'm sitting down with the chief marketing officer of Walmart, and I was 26 years old, and talking about their core strategic initiatives, and then teaching them, as though I've got the answer at 26 years old what the CMO for Walmart should be doing, or the chief marketing officer from Verizon, or, the chief marketing officer from Salesforce. Like, it was amazing. And so you don't really realize it at the time. Now, looking back, I do realize, like, what an incredible privilege to be able to have time on their diary to get the insights into their world. And then, funnily enough, Dave, as I've gone through my career, I've often looked back and connected back to a lot of those individuals and said, hey, like, can I pick your brain? Can I chat with you about something? Can I run something through you? Especially as a small business owner, and being able to do that has been immensely, immensely valuable. But, I'm not sure who we thought we were, but we certainly had some swagger, and we had a good time doing it. But yeah, great, great, great opportunity for me.
Yeah. And did you find in that period, do you think that accelerated your development? Were you older than your age by the time you'd gone through that sort of process, do you think?
I think that's been a bit of a defining narrative for me anyway, right? So I also thought that when I playing minor league baseball, so if I go back a step, I think playing minor league baseball itself made me older in experience than I was in years, because when you're playing minor league baseball, number one, you have to have the discipline to stay focused on your training and your craft. And at the same time, you're taking the field, let's say, in front of, 10 or 15,000 people, or 5,000, or whatever it may be. Sometimes it's 5 people. But depending on where you're playing, you always have somebody looking over your shoulder. I can remember pitching and looking in the stands, and there's 3 other pitchers who the team is getting ready, looking to sign if you don't perform well. And you are only ever as good as your next game. And meanwhile, you're playing away. You've taken a 20-hour bus ride to get to this like little podunk town. You've got an entire, stands of people shouting at you, calling you every name in the book, seeming to know a lot about my mother or my sister or my girlfriend. And you're having to perform in these conditions. And now, again, I didn't realize what a condensed pressure cooker that was, and how you need to very quickly learn how to manage these ups and downs of emotions and performance. You can't get too high because you had a great game, and you can't get too low because you had a bad game. And how do you maintain that focus? So fast forward, one of the amazing things I was able to lean on was a lot of those same kind of, elements. And then I went into corporate executive board, was put in a role that was about, 42 times, outside of, what I should be doing, way over my skate tips, but applying that kind of same thought process. And then you're in these conversations with senior executives, and you're helping them prep for a board meeting, or you're getting them best practices around, some huge segmentation initiative that they're going through. You're on planes, trains, automobiles, traveling through the night, trying to get to the meeting, making sure you're prepped. So again, you don't realize what that's doing for you. And as I look now in the business that I run, all of that was an incredible incredible training. And in fact, most of the people who worked at corporate executive board have gone on to incredible things. Funnily enough, last bit of this is I spent last week negotiating a Formula One deal, and I won't say with whom, but with one of my former colleagues at CEB, who is now the chief marketing officer of a company that's going to go into a Formula One deal. And the two of us, spending 48 hours literally head down trying to negotiate a term sheet with a Formula One team. So it's an incredible, journey, and produced some really, really interesting people. So it was a great journey.
Yeah. And how important were the coaches, the mentors in that process to give you that sort of stability operating window that you're talking about?
Oh, beyond. I mean, I remember them so fondly, not only by name, but we're still in touch, right? And to give you an idea, one of which wonderful, wonderful guy called Tom Spurchek, who ended up leaving corporate executive board and went to McKinsey and then to Carlyle, and now is running a large enterprise business that's owned by Carlyle. He was just in the UK. He and his wife came by the house for dinner. And, so you maintain these long relationships. I still tap into them for a great deal of advice. And I'll give you another interesting story. So there was a guy called Mike Archer, who was my hero. He was president of sales and marketing at CEB. And he is the one, you talk about culture and you talk about wanting to advance people in their careers and to coach and to mentor and to develop. I went to Mike before I even really knew him. He was my hero. He didn't know that, and just went up to him one day and said, Mike, I just want you to know who I am because I think I can make the company a lot of money one day. Now, he said, okay, well, what are we going to do about that? And I said, it's over to you now. Now, he could have just let that, go and just chalked it up to some, crazy, arrogant, a kid coming out of baseball. The next day, Dave, I got a phone call from HR that morning saying, Mike Archer says we need to know who you are. So they brought me in, started talking to me about, what I wanted to do. 3 weeks later, I was bumped up, and I can't remember if it was 2 roles or 3 roles, but I was bumped up outside of my current role to go and carry a bag in front of, C-suite executives. So, again, I go back to Mike could have played that any number of ways. And if it weren't for him, I may not be sitting right here, but guys like Pat McGlynn, he used to let me come in at 6:30 in the morning and role play with me. He was a world-class sales executive there. And I'd bring him his Starbucks at 6:30 every morning. And, I'd say, hey, Pat, hey, Ricky, what are we going to cover today? And, that openness, that leaning in, that development, incredible, really, really incredible. And I try to pay that forward now because of what an impact it had on me.
I mean, you use the word relationships, and I would love to dig a little bit deeper because in today's fast-moving world, have people forgotten the importance of relationships? I know I've built my career probably through 40, at most, really, really good relationships over a long period of time because you look after those people, they come back to you, they work with you, they become friends. Just talk a little bit about how important managing and looking after relationships is. I'd love to get your perspective because you're clearly good at it.
No, I don't know if I'm good at it, but I think it's one of those things that you can never just fully being good at, right? I think it's always an ongoing process, but I think it has to be. I think first the back step is you have to genuinely care about that individual. It can't just be purely transactional because if it's transactional, eventually that becomes hollow and it fades. You genuinely have to care about that individual and want their mutual success. And I really do believe that it has to be mutual and it can't be always an ask, right? So it's trying to think about how do I add value to that person first before I then ask for anything. So I'm a huge believer in it. I wouldn't have done any of the kind of fun and cool stuff without those relationships. And I think, Dave, my view is right now, in this world of AI, and I'm watching what that's doing, just say to go to market in general. And it's just volume of noise and more messaging and more content. And I actually think that we're going to revert to what the human interaction looks like, what experiences look like. Now, for our business, that translates into how do we spend time around racetracks or golf courses
Mm.
or other sporting events, right? But I do believe that they're going to be, not only have they been so important to me, I think they're going to become ever more present. But I think you have to start with this core of, do you care about that person? Do you want to add value to them? And if you do, you'll get great things that come back to you. If it's always about you and the benefit to you, it's going to be hollow and it's not going to last long.
Yeah. And some of your relationships must have lasted many, many years. Do you find you've got a sort of inner sanctum or a core of relationships where you really care about those people, and you've got 20, 30, 40 people in your sort of inner sanctum?
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, absolutely. Right. But I think I'd love to get your view, but I feel like it ebbs and flows. Right. And I think you go into this group for a little bit, you come back out, you go into this group, and then you go back into that group. Right. It's people are busy. Right. And
Yeah.
it's not always super linear. It's ever evolving, and you have to kind of manage it at the right and different times. But yeah.
Do you find, I recently was in Sydney in Australia, and I met up with one of my old WPP colleagues that we figured it out. We hadn't seen each other since 2002. So it was like 23 years. And we had lunch, and it was like as if no time had passed. It was like this relationship just lived in its own little bubble. And, he's since come over to the UK. We've hooked up again. We had a fantastic night. And you just go like, how does that happen? How can you almost pick up on the conversations from 25 years ago as if no time has passed? And that seems to happen time and time again. Does that happen in your world, where you've almost got a railway line of that relationship, and and then sometimes the tracks join up and you connect people?
Oh, all the time. I'm sure anybody listening to this will be thinking, of those same things. Gosh, I mean, I didn't see that person forever, and it's like it was yesterday. Again, I think that comes back to the core of, you care about that person, right? And seeing them again, you want to lean in and know everything that's going on in their lives, and be able to support them. I mean, same thing. The guy that I told you, Tom, who was just here in the UK. I mean, I hadn't seen him for 17 years. It just picked up like it was like I had seen him the day prior. And look, Dave, no, we're getting older too, man. So the years go by a little bit quicker. So suddenly it's like, I haven't seen you. Gosh, what's it been? 2 years? And I go, it's been 15. I think that all starts from, if you go back to whatever that was 22 years ago, you obviously did something to really make an impression on that person,
Yeah.
right? Whether it was, and if they were a client, it was because you were prepared and you delivered great work and you did it in a caring way, in a thoughtful way, in a considered way, and they grew respect for you, right? And if it's a friend, it's because you were there and you leaned in and you cared about them. What doesn't happen is that 22 years later, you just meet up with somebody that was very transactional, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the only way that you can make that bridge, is that it has to have started with, I care about this person, I'm going to add value to them, whether it's personally or professionally, and I know you do that incredibly well. So that's why you can meet up in Sydney and pick up where you left
Yeah.
off.
No, I must admit, I tend to think the relationships I have with the people I care about are the most valuable asset in my life. And, the business basically is a network of relationships. And when you write it down and you draw a spider's web of the relationships and how your business has grown over time, it's quite extraordinary how you can see 5, 6 people have absolutely given you the permission to build a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, gosh, I can't even imagine what that piece of work would look like, right? Trying to connect all the dots.
Piece of paper.
Yeah, I mean, look, my wife gives me a hard time because she's like, you don't have any friends, and I'm like, well, that's true, because I'm always, working or on the road, but my friends are all these incredible people that I get to interact with, right? And what the amazing thing is, I can go to a Formula E race weekend, and I get to hang out with Jeff Dodds, CEO of FE, who I just is very much like I look up to him, but we've got a great friendship. I get to see Ian James over at Jaguar Racing. I get to see the guy, Baron Siminger at Porsche, or all these great friends that I've made, and I genuinely go there to like not only work, but to socialize and see them and hang out. So, I guess those are my friends. So I'll have to tell my wife that, but she still says I have no friends.
No, well, I was talking to somebody the other day about this phrase, I work to live. And I think when you're an entrepreneur and when you're a business owner, actually it all just blends together into one world. And I don't understand this concept of, I just work so I can go on holiday, or I work to have a life outside of work, because then you can't be, my work is my hobby, and I bet yours is. And
yeah.
How do you get to that point, do you think, where we sit here and we're very privileged to have got to a point where we're in control of our own destiny? But how do you get to that point where your work and your hobby are the same thing and you're playing with your train set every day?
I don't know, Dave. I am a big believer that, you have where you kind of think you want to be. Now, it just so happened for me, I did want to be in control of my own destiny, and I wanted to bear that risk. Now, I also have some friends who say, look, they like the steady, the stable, they like to know that they've got a paycheck every month, and they live for that holidays. And that's in their value set, and their decision framework is based around that. It just so happens that, I can remember being fully employed and taking a phone call and going for a walk in Kensington one day, and I was looking it up, all these amazing, beautiful houses, and I thought, not that I need to go live in one of those, but it's not in my control. I didn't feel like it was in my control. So the reason I said, okay, I'm going to go do my own thing is because I wanted to be able to say, okay, maybe I get to one of those houses, maybe I don't. It doesn't really matter. But am I in control of that? Is that up to me? Is that destiny up to me? And I was willing to bear that risk, and that was part of my value set and how I wanted to live. So I think that you only get to that if that matters to you. Like if it really does matter to you that you control your own destiny, and if you're willing to bear the risk. If those things don't matter to you, then you're not going to get to play with your train set every day. And that's okay too, right? And you find your hobbies and you do that on the side. It just so happens that I don't have any hobbies like you. My business and my work is my hobby. And then the rest of the time I spend with my kids and my wife. And that's how I want to do it. So anyway, to your point, we're very lucky to be able to do that. Others might say, "Hey, I'd never want to bear it. I'd never want to get involved in that."
There's a lot of stresses and strains come with running a business.
Really? No, there's not. It's all easy stuff, man. It's all easy. What are you talking about?
Yeah, take me through it. So, I mean, how did you get into sports marketing? What was the trigger for that? Because I'm sure a lot of people go, "Oh, I'd love to be in sports marketing," but I bet it's a tough old game.
Oh man, it's a killer game. It's a killer game. It's dressed up like a really pretty shiny thing, but it is a killer game. Look, I'll tell you the real story. I always make the joke that I wasn't smart enough or talented enough to get involved in Formula One or Formula E or in sports on my own, right? So I kind of had to go out and just start my own business. Like nobody would hire me to have any of those jobs. I just had to start my own business. But, just like anything most people will say is they kind of like fall backwards into it. But again, if I go to having that framework of what's important to you, then every decision you make gets put through that frame and it kind of leads you in the general direction. Even if you're bouncing between the guardrails and it's nonlinear, you're still moving in a forward direction, right? And so what I mean by that is this. So when I was a corporate executive board, we got acquired by Gartner. For those who don't know it, it's a technology kind of research and membership based business, and very, very staid, and a lot of guys in gray suits. So not really my jam. So I had to figure out who I wanted to be when I grew up. I kind of had three key principles, right? So one was I wanted to do big deals. I'm a commercial guy. I like to do commercial things, and I wanted to do big deals. Secondly was I wanted to do it in a really cool industry. And thirdly was I wanted to do it with really good people. That was it. Like those are the three things. And so where that initially led me was that I was with no reason that I should be allowed to do this. I started brokering capital as like a one-man merchant bank between private equity firms in the US, family offices, ultra high net worth individuals, and acquisition opportunities in Europe. So, hey, there's a football club, English Premier League football club that they want to buy, or Formula One team that they want to invest in, or it could be a sports digital publishing house, whatever it was. So that's kind of where I started in my sporting journey. That led me to meeting a guy called Enrique Benuelos, Spanish billionaire, made 8 billion by the age of 43. And he had just underpinned and funded Formula E. And I worked on the Series A and the Series B capital rounds to trying to find strategic investors. That led me to Richard Branson, who I tried to get into an equity position. He came in with a team and then later asked me to stay with the team to help kind of in the go-to-market and, bring new partners on board. And I was very fortunate. I brought in Peugeot Group as a title sponsor. I brought in Hewlett Packard Enterprise and a couple of others. Through that journey, I realized, you know what? I really enjoy this kind of partnership creation. And it brought me back to my CEB days and being in front of corporate executives, big deals, and less having to deal with bankers and quite finicky, ultra high net worth individuals that could just, emotively change a, decision at any given time. And so, that was a big pivot for me. Like, hey, no, I want to go this way. And I don't want to just work with Virgin Racing. I want to do stuff with all the teams in Formula E and the championship. And so at that moment, I thought I can do this. Now it was kind of, now I look back and it was like a most ridiculous, crazy assumption because, at the time, like, up until recently, Formula One's gotten a huge boost, but there might be a total of 10 to 20 kind of decent sized sponsorship deals at the time that were being done across Formula One, Formula E, World Endurance Championships. I don't know why I thought I could get one or two of, 4 of those, but I just, naivety is sometimes a really good thing. But yeah, I just had this belief that I could go and sell it. And if I applied my kind of old sales rigor that I had at CB to this kind of same process to sponsorship sales, and this new platform of Formula E, I thought I could do it. So that's how I went that direction. And now, we're 9 years in and we've, got a team of folks and we've got new services and we do activation. We got world-class clients around the world and Formula One and Formula E and golf and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, crazy journey.
Yeah. And at what point did you form a company? At what point was 1440 born?
Yeah. So October 2018, I had a 1-year-old daughter. I had a brand new house and just literally was, one guy, it was me. Didn't even have a website. I didn't have a business card. But, what I will say is I had just started talking to a large advanced materials company called Dow. And they said, hey, can you help us figure out this Formula E thing? And so, as I often kind of like coach young people who want to start their own business is how do you build a business off of one great client? And that's what I did. Dow is still very much a client. They've been with me now for 9 years. And 1440 in many respects is the house that Dow built because, they took a leap with me. And then, based on the work that I did with Dow, I brought in a couple more people and, we got lucky with a couple of deals and, off we went. That's kind of how we did it.
No, and, I use that phrase luck every now and again, but actually, in reality, you make your own luck, don't you?
I'm a full subscriber to that.
What you're describing and what you've carved out of bare rock is incredible. But I would imagine, the work and the hours you've had to put in to make that work. And, new house, 1-year-old child, those are the perfect motivators for success. And you can't fail, can you? You have no choice but to succeed.
It's weird. You do gloss over it over time, right? It's like you forget all the hard, like the really hard stuff. I don't know about you. I still have an imposter syndrome. Like I keep waiting for somebody to like tap me on the shoulder and be like, what are you doing? Like you don't have any credibility here. So there is a little bit of like that humility of having to keep going. I mean, we've done great stuff, but I still feel like I'm trying to prove myself. Right. Now I will tell you, I can remember my wife and I waking up, looking at each other at 4:00 one morning and going, we've got enough cash for 3 months to live, like pay the mortgage, cover the food, like 3 months. In that 3 months, I went and found a deal. And I can't magic those up. I wish I could magic those up all the time, but I magicked one up. So that was a little bit of luck. It was also a little bit of hard work. I think it was the culmination of hard work that kind of culminated in those 3 months, right? So I couldn't have deadlifted it. I didn't deadlift it by any stretch, but I fully remember that moment when we're like, we're not in a good place right now.
I know that feeling very well.
Yeah.
When you leave a great job and suddenly you got zero, and you're sat at a kitchen table and you try to figure out how you're going to make this work. It focuses the mind, that's for sure.
It does something like that. Funnily enough, my wife started her own business in the same year that we both went out on our own at the same time. And I still very proudly to this day, I think somewhere we've got our earnings sheet or something. It was like 12,000 pounds that we combined made for the year in our first year. We just took any free work. We raised our hand for anything. But as a result, it didn't fill the coffers to the point we got pretty tight there. But that was a little bit of insult to injury, both of us out on our own at the same time. That was an interesting time.
Yeah. No, gluttons for punishment. So your sort of expertise in relationships, did that drive you to pick motorsport and golf as your two sort of focus areas? Is there something about motorsport and golf and relationships that makes it a real area of interest for you, or do you just like hitting a ball with a slightly longer stick these days?
Oh man. Well, so first of all, I'm a terrible golfer. So that's point A. I never play. I haven't played. Actually, I just recently played in like a pro-am thing, but I never played. Secondly, is I knew nothing about motorsport, Dave. Okay, I still don't. The first time I ever met David Coulthard, I asked him what he did for a living. Right. So just to give you an idea,
He'd probably like that.
I did it about 20 minutes later with Mark Webber, and then I decided to stop asking that question ever again. So no, look, they were strategic. They were strategic. So I'll give you the very quick, relationships and then how we get to motorsport. When I was at CEB and I was working with chief marketing officers and primarily B2B CMOs, every time I talked to them, they always talked about every bit of the channel mix. Anything that they were doing was aimed to get their salespeople in front of senior decision makers, right? Because when they do that, they're able to, their close rates go up, their margins go up, deal sizes go up, deal velocity also, right? So everything was about how do they get 30 minutes for their sales teams with a decision maker. So when I looked at where there was a seminal piece of research that came out after what was called the Challenger sale, which we worked on at CB, that was called the Challenger customer. And the notion of that is this: the buyers are harder to reach than ever before, enterprise buyers. So if you're selling technology to a company, that CIO, CTO, whoever it may be, they're harder to reach than ever before. They can self-serve on the internet. The proclivity of tech and the explosion of tech has meant that they can't keep track of the pace. So what they're doing is they're retreating, and they're either going to a Gartner or a Deloitte, an Accenture, and they're saying, like, how do I build my tech stack? So as a result, these marketing organizations have like, well, let's just do more of the same stuff we're already doing. Let's do more trade shows. Let's do more content. Let's do more case studies. And as a result, all they're doing is just spending more money and getting less result. So when I looked at this kind of paradigm shift of what was happening in go-to-market for B2B, and then I applied my experience to seeing what was going on in Formula E and motorsport, I said, well, nobody ever told me about this motorsport thing before and sports marketing and how it could solve that issue. And I saw that it could solve that issue because what you could do was authentically integrate your technology into like a race team or racing championship or golf later on that we got into. And then if I brought a customer or a prospect there, then I would spend all day with that customer with my technology at the heart of the conversation. And then eventually you can only talk about the technology so long. So then you start to talk about friends and family and aspirations and career, and you get to know that person on a personal level. So that's why we're called 1440 Sports, because that's the number of minutes in a day. And so from me, that's 48 30-minute meetings. There's no other anchor in your channel mix that's going to allow somebody to do that. And so when I looked at motorsport, okay, it's got loads and loads of technology embedded in it, lots of data, innovation. It's always on. So the content is always on, 40 minutes a day, 365 days a year. And so it was very much a strategic choice to say, I want to solve that B2B go to market issue. And I think motorsport is going to be my mousetrap to do it. And then it just so happened that, golf kind of does the same thing. You spend it all day out on the golf course, with a client. And golf has become also very, very much technology led. So that's why we ended up in golf and motorsport. And ultimately why I say that we're a B2B go-to-market consultancy dressed up as a sports marketing firm, because the aim is to solve that issue, not necessarily to stick logos on race cars and go drink champagne. Yes, we do some of that too. But I would profess I still know very, very little about motorsport, but I'm pretty good at B2B go-to-market.
That's fantastic. I mean, what a fabulous way to sort of close out the podcast. I mean, it's just a brilliant idea. I love it. I really love it.
Okay.
Now, we always end the podcast with a little bit of a fun fact. Now, I'm not sure your fact is fun, but your passion for marathons and ultra marathons, and that doesn't sound like fun to me at all. And my wife would probably tell me I need to do some of those. But how did you get into that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, my wife. I haven't done them for a while, Dave. My wife still kind of puts my running shoes next to the bedside table to remind me. Now, remember when you used to, that's like that was the guy that I married, not this guy here, right? Like so. Look, I will tell you very quickly. I came to London. I was going up very, very early days in London. One of the first weeks I was here. And I was going up the Holborn tube station. It's a huge escalator. And I was, you stand on the right or you walk on the left. And I was walking up. And I got to the top and I was completely winded. I was like out of breath. I was 30 years old.
Wow.
And I thought, man, I've always been an athlete. I play professional sports. Like, I got to do something about this. And so I actually didn't go to the office. I went to Nike Town where Nike Town was, where Oxford Circus, right on the corner. And I just went in there and I bought like all this running kit, which is actually pretty funny because in my size, they only had like the bright yellow. So I had all this like bright yellow running stuff. But I just started I was like, I need to start doing something. And so I started actually, funnily enough, because I was early in London, I would every morning I would run to a different place in London than I hadn't seen before. So I was like, I haven't seen St. Paul's Cathedral. I'm going to run to St. Paul's Cathedral and back. I was living in Marylebone. And then it got to the point where I was like, I've never been to Richmond. I'm going to run to Richmond and back on a Saturday. And it just so happens that's about 26 miles. And then I would take a train down to like Eastbourne and I would run from Eastbourne to Brighton. And that's about 40 miles. And I just was like, I just kind of got into it. So what ended up happening is that one day I was watching, it was like an ABC Wide World of Sports or something like that. And I saw all these people, Dave, finishing this race at the pyramids of Giza, and they were all sizes and shapes. Some of them were really heavy set. Some of them were short and tall. Some of them looked super athletic. Some of them didn't. And I'm watching these people finish this 250-kilometer race through the desert at the pyramids of Giza with all their equipment on their back. And I'm like, well, if they can do that, I'm 6'3", I'm 6'3", with an athletic background, like I should be able to do that. And so I just went online, I found it, I signed up, and I started preparing and training, and then I went and did it, and I loved it. It was crazy, crazy hot and hard and all that kind of stuff, but I met great people, just like anything. I met great people, and then that's how I got into it. But it's a lot of fun.
Wow. Inspirational. It's been an absolute pleasure the time's just flown by. Loved learning more about your thinking and everything that you're doing, Ricky. And congratulations on 1440. It's something you have to sort of do with real pride, building a business from scratch and carving it out of bare rock. It's such a laudable thing to do.
Thank you. Well, the trials and tribulations. So, but I appreciate you saying that. We're still trying to get there. But no, thank you, Dave. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brand Pi and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brandpi.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.